The laughter echoed under the reception hall lights as whispers spread, sweat prickling at my collar. I'm Eli Mercer, in my 50s, a university administrator. My folding chair sat unused in the corner, wood grain catching the glow. What do you do when family turns your seat into a spectacle? Roland's laugh rang across the reception hall, sharp as a fork scraping porcelain. Guess Eli doesn't even rate a seat, he said, and a ripple of chuckles followed. My collar stuck to my neck in the August heat, the smell of brisket and perfume heavy under the chandeliers. I forced a smile as if the joke had landed on someone else. The seating chart stood near the guest book. My fingertips slid down neat rows of names, each written in my niece's looping hand. Cousins, neighbors, distant in-laws, all listed. No Eli. The gap was too precise to be a mistake. Behind me, Roland raised his glass, daring me to look. I didn't. Mom touched my sleeve. Her hair was pinned carefully, but her hand trembled. "Don't react," she whispered. Her eyes carried the same warning they had when I was 12 and Roland knocked me into the dirt behind Grandpa's barn. Some things never change, except now the dirt had been replaced with polished tile and a crowd of relatives in pressed suits. "I'll stand," I murmured. The words tasted like rust. Across the room, a stack of unused wooden chairs leaned against the wall, sturdy and ignored. One glance at them, and I felt my jaw tighten. They could have solved the problem, but no one thought to bring one forward. Or maybe someone had thought and chosen not to. I tugged at my tie, catching the faint scent of cologne, already faded with sweat. The band started a line dance. Roland's laugh rose again, drawing eyes in my direction. A couple of cousins whispered into their hands. I imagined how the story would travel. Eli left off the chart, Eli without a seat. In Wharton, gossip moves faster than the Guadalupe River after rain. I stepped outside before the heat inside became unbearable. The metal door gave a hollow thump, and the night wrapped me in its thick August breath. Cicadas whirred from the pecan trees. Out here the air smelled of cut grass and diesel from trucks parked along the gravel. I loosened my tie and listened to the muffled cheer when the DJ announced the cake cutting. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, a man of 55, suit pressed, but sweat creeping down the spine, the kind of man you don't notice until something breaks. My job at the university had taught me that. Facilities work only gets attention when the lights go out or the pipes burst. Tonight I was the outage. Roland's words replayed sharper now without the music to drown them. I walked to my car shoes, crunching gravel. Each step felt like I was carrying more than weight. It was the years of being tolerated, not welcomed. The fob clicked and my hazard lights blinked twice orange winks in the dark. The trunk lifted with a sigh. Inside jumper cables, a canvas bag of tools, a folded blanket, and against the tote the old folding chair I'd picked up at a church sale, oak slats, rubbed smooth hinges, still solid. I'd kept it for emergencies, tailgates, community meetings, the kind of places where chairs ran short. Its weight was familiar in my hands, heavier than it looked. I ran my thumb along the grain, remembering Saturday mornings tightening the screws on my porch. The cicadas droned louder, as if pushing me back inside. I pictured walking in, setting the chair at table 2, and sitting quietly, daring anyone to move me. No drama, just wood against floor proof that I carried my own place. But Mom's voice echoed, "Don't react." She had endured enough public scenes to know the cost. I stood with the chair half out of the trunk, caught between the burn of humiliation and the pull of restraint. The hall's lights glowed against the asphalt, a reminder of the family still laughing inside without me. The chair rested in my grip, solid and waiting. My breath slowed to match the cicada's pulse. I hadn't made a move yet, but the vow was already stirring. One way or another, I would reclaim a seat. "Have you seen this memo?" The words slipped from a colleague's mouth before the elevator doors had even finished opening. Monday mornings are cruel enough. This one arrived with whispers instead of greetings. I stepped into the hallway, the hum of fluorescent lights above steady as a scolding. The smell of toner hung in the air, faint but insistent, like paper carried bad news long before the words were read. Stacks of printouts sat crooked in the trays outside HR edges, still damp. I reached for one, but the woman at the copier pulled her hand back, fast eyes flicking away as if I'd asked to borrow her wedding ring. By the time I made it to my office, the sound of voices filled the corridor, then stopped. Conversations hushed in a rhythm I recognized too well, the way relatives quiet when Roland clears his throat before a story. Only this time, the setting was no dance hall. This was my workplace, the university campus where I'd kept things running for years. Tonight's gossip had traded pews for cubicles, and Roland's reach stretched longer than I had believed. I caught sight of my name before I heard it, Mercer in bold on the memo's third line, tucked under the heading Property Misuse. The footnote that followed coiled tight around my stomach. See also family connection, Roland Mercer. Family disgrace dressed in administrative language was now official record. I pushed open my office door and found the HR director already waiting. She was never early. Her folder sat square in the center of my desk. "The board is watching," she said, as if practicing lines from a play she didn't want to be in. She didn't meet my eyes. Instead, she studied the faded carpet like it might offer her another script. "What exactly are they watching?" I asked. My voice held steady, though my palms sweated against the leather strap of my briefcase. She nudged the folder toward me, but didn't open it. "It's precaution. You know how these things spread. Like mildew. Like Roland's laughter at the wedding that never left my ears. The same burn lit my face now." I pulled the folder closer. Pages inside smelled faintly of chemicals, the kind that linger after a late-night print job. Words jumped at me, inappropriate allocation of resources, potential conflict of interest. Mercer. Every bullet point pointed not only to me, but through me, as if my name were a crack running down the foundation. Outside the door, a staffer's shoes squeaked on linoleum. I heard another whisper. "That's him." The shame mirrored the wedding 2 years earlier. No seat then, no voice now. My tongue thickened. I gripped the edge of my chair, the wood-pressing lines into my palm, just to remind myself I still had weight in this world. The HR director cleared her throat. "It's not formal discipline. Not yet." Her tone said everything else. I closed the folder slowly, the paper edges scraping against each other. My pulse drummed louder than the lights overhead. Family business had bled into professional life, staining both. I thought of the folding chair in my trunk, oak grain steady under my hands that night. I hadn't carried it into the hall, but here in Houston, the memory sat heavier than any seat I could take. By mid-afternoon, the memo lived everywhere. Copies on desks, snippets in inboxes, phrases repeated in lowered voices. Property misuse Mercer. I walked the hallway, every eye slipping away before it met mine. A couple of grad assistants laughed too sharply when I passed, then pretended they hadn't. Even the janitor paused with his mop halfway to the floor. I stopped at the water fountain, pressed the button, watched the stream arc too high, spilling over before settling. The noise covered my breathing. Water dripped onto my shoes, tiny stains darkening the leather. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen, like I had when Roland toasted me into absence. My phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. Family bleeds into career. Back down. The hallway noise dimmed. My thumb hovered above the screen, but I didn't answer. I slid the phone back into my pocket, feeling its weight join the folder, the whispers, the years. The chill from the fountain lingered on my shoes. I turned toward my office, each fluorescent hum above marking another step into silence. The diner's neon buzzed like a stubborn fly, half-lit letters sputtering against the frosted windows. Inside the booths were patched with duct tape, the air thick with bacon grease and burnt coffee. Colonel Knox sat across from me, his uniform long retired, but his posture still straight enough to shame a cadet. He stirred his mug slowly, metal spoon clinking porcelain in deliberate beats. His eyes sharp and steady, never left mine. "You look like a man carrying a chair on his back," he said, voice gravel-worn. I managed a half-smile tugged at my cuff. "Might as well be. Family business doesn't stay at weddings anymore. Now it leaks into memos." Steam curled off my own mug, fogging my glasses. I pulled them off, wiped them with a napkin already streaked with ketchup stains. The smear didn't clear, but Knox didn't flinch. He'd seen worse fog than mine. "Roland laughed me out of my niece's reception," I said. "And now the board sees my name in black and white. Property misuse, conflict of interest. Mercer. Same shame, new room." The waitress slid by, topping off his mug before mine. Her hand steady, though the pot wobbled. She didn't linger. Folks in Wharton knew when to leave a conversation to men who weren't smiling. Knox set his spoon down then with a click that carried farther than it should have laid a fountain pen on the table. Black lacquer brass trim heavier than any plastic ballpoint. "Proof speaks when victims can't," he said. I rolled the phrase in my mind. Proof. Victims. I thought of the memo's damp paper edges, of Roland's toast at the wedding of cousins whispering. My hand hovered near the pen, not touching, just feeling its presence like a challenge. "You think I should fight?" I asked. "I think you should build your own seat," Knox said. He leaned back, cracked vinyl squeaking under his shoulders. "Rage will break the chair before you sit in it. Discipline, though, that will hold you." The bacon smell clung to my clothes, heavy as Roland's smirk. I leaned forward. Discipline doesn't clear my name from a board memo. Knox smiled, one side of his mouth only. But evidence does. Paper talks. Always has. He slid a folded napkin across to me. A number scrawled in neat block letters. A lawyer in Houston he trusted. This man knows how to stack documents higher than lies. Call him. I stared at the napkin, then at the pen. My chest tightened, not from grease or coffee, but from the sudden sense of route. A map where before there was only fog. "What if it backfires?" I asked. "It will," Knox said plainly. "Every move backfires some. But when smoke clears, it's what stands that matters. Proof. Your own seat. Built solid." The words bit harder than I expected. Dignity wasn't about slamming a chair onto a dance floor or shouting down whispers in a hallway. It was about gathering the quiet weight of documents, of minutes notarized, of ledgers balanced. It was about patience that doesn't flinch when mocked. The diner clatter swelled, a plate cracked in the kitchen silverware clanged into a tub. A family near the window argued about hash browns. For a moment, I wasn't sure if I'd imagined Knox's words, but then I felt the pen still resting between us. I reached out, rolled it once across my palm. It was cooler than I expected, heavier too. I set it back, quickly embarrassed at how natural it felt. Knox watched me without a blink. Carry the pen, not the anger. That's how you'll last. I nodded, though my throat stayed tight. The waitress refilled my mug, steam rising again. I let it fog my glasses once more, not bothering to wipe. Sometimes blur helps. We talked a little longer. Names contacts the right courthouse windows to stand under. Knox's voice stayed calm, each word sanded smooth by years of command. By the time he slid out of the booth, his plate was still half full. He never did eat much when the talk mattered. He left a few bills under the edge of his plate, military neat. The bell over the door jingled as he stepped into the cold. I sat back, hand brushing the tabletop where the pen had been. Only it hadn't left. It sat right there, black and gleaming. I picked it up unconsciously, turning it once in my hand. The weight settled into my pocket as naturally as keys. I didn't remember deciding to keep it. My coffee had gone cold, but the vow inside me had warmed. Out the window, the neon buzzed on letters sputtering, never fully dark. The storm pressed against the garage door, thunder rolling like drums hidden behind clouds. Humidity clung to everything: oil cans, rags, the cardboard boxes stacked crooked in the corner. I tugged out an old file box, the cardboard sagging in my hands, and a sheaf of papers slid across the workbench. The top page bore Roland's signature, bold and slanted but wrong in ways my gut recognized before my eyes did. Mom stood near the door arms, wrapped in her shawl, even though the air was warm. She had followed me out reluctantly, slippers whispering against the concrete. The smell of motor oil mixed with musty paper, a reminder that some truths don't rot fast, they linger until someone digs them up. I spread the deed across the bench, smoothing wrinkles with the flat of my palm. The county clerk record I'd pulled earlier sat beside it. Side by side, the differences weren't subtle. The dates didn't match, the witness lines were blank, and Roland's handwriting looked like a parody of itself, swagger turned shaky. Mom's voice was a whisper. I thought maybe he'd done something. But I prayed I was wrong. Her fingers clutched the shawl tighter. I reached for another document, an HOA notice tucked deep in the pile. Late fees in red ink, initials scribbled with the same flourish. Beneath it, a 401k withdrawal slip, the kind I'd seen too many staff wrestle with at the university. The balance had drained like a leaking hose, and the beneficiary's name again. Roland's hand was proof, stacked on proof. Thunder cracked, rattling the windows. I lowered myself into the folding chair beside the bench, the one I'd carried from the trunk years ago. Its oak slats held my weight until they didn't. A sharp creak, then a split wood groaning metal hinge straining. The sound shot through me, a jagged echo of the forged deed spread before me. I leaned forward, gripping the bench to steady myself. Mom flinched at the crack. "Don't," she said quickly. "Please, Eli, don't drag this into the open. He'll ruin you before you ruin him." I looked at her, the woman who'd told me not to react at the wedding, the woman who had tried to hold a family together with silence and prayer. Her eyes were pleading, but behind them lived years of suspicion that had finally surfaced. "This ends with evidence," I said, each word steady against the thunder. "Not silence. Not anymore." The garage smelled sharper now wet concrete, as rain seeped under the doorpaper ink dampening at the edges. I stacked the records neatly, each page a nail in Roland's coffin. Fraud wasn't just family shame anymore. It was legal, financial, public. The chair groaned again under me, a splinter catching the cuff of my pants. I stood before. It gave way completely, one hand brushing the wood grain that had once felt solid. The crack would stay a reminder that even the sturdiest seats can fail when truth presses too hard. My phone buzzed on the bench, vibrating against the deed. A message from a number I now recognized the lawyer Colonel Knox had mentioned. Available to meet. Tomorrow. I slid the pen from my pocket, Knox's pen, the weight of it grounding me. Tomorrow, I whispered more to myself than to Mom. Outside, thunder rolled again, but I wasn't shaken. The seat had cracked, yes, but I was standing. The cursor blinked in the dark like a tiny pulse, steady and patient. Subject line, Mercer evidence packet. The clock on the wall ticked past 11:59, each second dragging a little longer than the last. The office was empty except for me and the hum of server fans in the next room, a low mechanical chorus that made the silence heavier. The coffee on my desk had burned itself bitter hours ago, a slick film clinging to the rim. I pushed it aside, spreading the folder across the keyboard, scanned deeds, the forged land transfer county clerk copies with the real dates, the memo with my name slashed across it. HOA notices in red ink, 401k withdrawal slips drained down to nothing. Photos of Roland's signature confident in some shaky in others. Each file a step closer to midnight. My fingers hovered, brushing the trackpad, dragging the cursor over the attachments. I thought of Knox's pen still heavy in my pocket, and the words he'd spoken, "Build your own seat." Tonight, I was building it in PDF format. I CC'd the lawyer in Houston, typed his address twice to be sure. I added Mom's name in the draft, but deleted it before hitting tab. She was asleep at home, and maybe it was better she didn't know until the packet had flown. Some truths need to arrive like sunrise, sudden, unavoidable, not asked for. The fan above clicked once, then steadied. A draft saved automatically timestamp glowing in the corner of the screen. 12:03 a.m. Already. Time had slipped past the hour while I sorted files, but the deadline wasn't about the clock on the wall. It was about me. The decision. I adjusted the chair beneath me, different from the cracked one in my garage, but still unsteady enough to remind me that nothing lasts forever. The seat squeaked metal, groaning like it had its own secret to keep. My phone buzzed once on the desk. A reminder, draft saved. Timer set. The lawyer's system worked like a fuse once I clicked schedule. Send the packet would launch even if I backed away. I scrolled through the files one last time. County clerk seal, faint red circle, barely visible through the scan. The memo's ink blurred where someone's thumb had pressed too hard. The HOA notice still smelled faintly of damp cardboard. Even digital, I could sense the weight of paper. My breath caught as I hovered over the button. Schedule, send. It wasn't glamorous, wasn't cinematic. It was louder in my chest than any gavel. I clicked. The confirmation box popped up. I set the time 12:05, just enough to lean back and feel the pressure settle. The cursor blinked again now, a countdown, not a question. The office pressed down around me, every fluorescent bulb buzzing faintly overhead. My reflection stared back from the darkened window, tired eyes, collar wrinkled but jaw set. the kind of man who'd run out of ways to be quiet. The laptop screen went dark as the fan cycled off a hush sweeping through the room. I whispered into the glow of the clock's ticking. The boardroom smelled of floor polish and sweat, a mix too sharp for the morning hour. Spring sunlight pushed through high windows hot against the polished tables where microphones waited like cold witnesses. Every chair was filled faculty in pressed suits, students and denim townsfolk craning from the back. Phones pointed forward, red camera lights blinking like tiny warning beacons. The air itself hummed with expectation. Roland sat 3 rows ahead, his lawyer slick as his hair papers fanned neatly across the table. He didn't bother with introductions. He leaned into the microphone, smile sharp. "This is simple," he said, voice carrying in the heavy air. "If Eli Mercer couldn't hold a seat in his own family, why should this board trust him with a seat here?" The laugh that rippled across the crowd was quieter than Roland's at the wedding, but it landed harder. Whispers spread, some covered mouths, some tapping the screens. I glimpsed Facebook feeds opening Twitter posts already tagging Mercer hearing. The external lens squeezed the room smaller. My chest tightened. I'd stood in boardrooms before routine maintenance budgets, safety reports, nods of acknowledgement, but never with the spotlight slamming heat against my forehead. My name projected on the screen beside the lawyer's slides looked foreign. Mercer Evidence Board Inquiry. Letters black against white, but heavy as stone. He held up the leaked memo, the one already dog-eared from passing too many hands. Evidence of misuse, he declared. Patterns of questionable behavior. And look, his own relative Roland Mercer confirms irregularities. He gestured to himself with a flourish, a mock bow. The crowd murmured again. I swallowed, throat dry as dust. The microphone in front of me picked up the sound echoing back into the hall. My voice cracked. This memo was... The lawyer cut in, practiced and smooth. "Fabricated excuses, ladies and gentlemen. Classic deflection. The truth is on paper." He slammed the folder shut for emphasis. Camera shutters clicked, catching my flinch. I felt sweat trace down my collar, dampening the cotton. My tie tightened with every breath. A woman in the second row leaned sideways, whispering, while her phone hovered just high enough to record. Behind her, a student lifted his laptop live stream chat glowing. Comments rolled fast. "He looks guilty. Why is he sweating so much?" The board chair frowned, tapping a pencil against the dais. His gaze slid to me. I opened my mouth again, but my tongue felt clumsy. This isn't another laugh from Roland's lawyer, rehearsed and sharp. "You hear that? Even now he can't form a defense. What does that tell you?" It told me I was drowning. My hands pressed flat to the table paper edges, biting into my palms. The smell of toner rose again, as if the memo itself were burning holes into the room. I tried to focus on Knox's words on proof on patience, but all I felt was heat-eyes shame. Flashes burst from the back journalists snapping photos. Each click sounded like a nail hammered in. I blinked, but the lights blurred spots dancing across my vision. The sweat stung my eyes, and I wiped at them clumsily. The crowd saw only weakness. Mr. Mercer, the chair, said, voice low but firm. "Do you have anything to add in your defense?" Every ear turned. The microphone hissed, waiting. My voice, when it came, was small. "The truth will speak." It sounded fragile, even to me. Heads shook in the audience. Tweets typed faster. The humiliation was complete. The shame felt heavier than the folding chair I hadn't carried inside years ago. My seat now was present, but no sturdier. I froze, staring at my blurred reflection in the table's polish, a man seen but not believed. The lawyer leaned back, satisfied, his hand resting on Roland's shoulder like a prize ribbon. The crowd murmured agreement. Then under the table my phone buzzed. Once steady, like a tap on the shoulder. I glanced down. A notification lit the screen. Evidence packet delivered 12:05 a.m. My breath caught. No one else noticed. Cameras kept flashing, whispers kept spreading, but I sat straighter, pen heavy in my pocket, as if midnight had just entered the boardroom. The boardroom hadn't cooled. The floor polish still stung my nose, the press of bodies still thickened the air. Lights bore down hotter than before, phone cameras blinking, red live stream counters climbing in the corner of the big screen. Then came a voice, firm and unshaken, cutting through the restless murmur. "Stand for your Major General." Colonel Knox rose from the third row, his hand raised in salute. His voice carried the weight of drills and parades, not suggestions. Heads turned. Even the lawyer's smirk faltered. For a moment the room froze, as if waiting to see whether the old colonel's words had authority left. Beside the podium sat a folding chair, its legs repaired with brass brackets. The light glinted off the metal, the creak of the hinge faint but steady, as though the chair itself had survived the trial. The board chair tapped the microphone. "Proceed," he said. His tone was dry, but his eyes flicked toward Knox with respect. I stepped forward, phone in hand. The evidence packet was ready. With a nod to the technician, the first page lit the projector screen. County clerk records filled the wall seals, crisp in red dates, clear. Over them, Roland's forged deed slanted like a counterfeit shadow. Gasps rustled the room. The next slide, HOA notices in thick red ink, balances unpaid. Then the 401k statements, withdrawals bleeding account totals down to nothing. Finally, screenshots of texts. "If you can't stay quiet, I'll make sure she replaces you." Each line displayed in silence the words louder than any accusation I could craft. Roland surged to his feet, fists clenched. "Lies, all of it," his voice cracked. The slick lawyer beside him tried to calm him, but Roland's face had reddened to blotches. "Mr. Mercer," the board chair said, "you will sit down." But he didn't. He raged on, voice spilling into the microphones, bouncing through the live stream. "He's no better than a thief. You think you can erase me with paperwork?" Delaney, pale and shaking, shoved her chair back so hard it scraped the floor. "I won't be part of this," she muttered, storming out past the cameras. Her heels clicked sharp against the tile until the doors swallowed her. Knox still stood arm firm in salute. His presence was steady as the repaired chair beside me. The audience, once whispering, leaned in. The live stream hearts began to flutter up the screen, pink and red icons dancing across evidence lines. The board chair lifted a folder, voice authoritative. "The decision of this board is reinstatement. Mr. Eli Mercer is cleared of misconduct and restored to full standing." His gavel struck, once echoing like a gunshot without smoke. Applause rose, not wild, not chaotic, but swelling like a tide. Some clapped cautiously, others with relief. The sound filled cracks shame had left behind. My throat tightened as I reached for the folding chair, its brass brackets cool beneath my fingers. I lifted it slowly, showing it whole again. A seat not broken, but mended. The cameras caught it flashes bright. The live stream counter surged higher, comments scrolling too fast to read. Applause swelled again, louder, a rhythm matching my heartbeat. The validation wasn't abstract, it was sound sight presence. Knox lowered his hand, eyes meeting mine steady. He didn't need words. His salute had already said them. Then, amid the applause, Roland hissed. He leaned forward, voice low enough that only I caught it. "You're no nephew of mine." I held the chair higher, its brass shining in the boardroom lights. For once, I didn't need to answer. The room had answered for me. The newspaper landed on the porch with a soft thud, though the headline struck harder: "Roland Mercer falls from grace." His mugshot stared up through gray ink, jaw set in a way that tried to hide how far he'd fallen. I rubbed the newsprint between my fingers until it smudged, leaving a stain on my jeans I couldn't shake off. Cicadas pulsed from the oak tree, their rhythm too steady to argue with. Mom stepped past me with a basket of laundry, humming a tune I half recognized from church. The dish towel snapped once in the sunlight as she shook it straight, then fluttered into place on the line. I realized it had been years since she'd hummed without word. "You're just staring holes through it," she said, nodding toward the paper. "Ink won't change if you glare at it long enough." "I was checking the spelling," I said. "They got Mercer right this time." She gave a faint smile, one that reached her eyes just enough to count. We settled into the porch rockers. The wood smelled warm in the summer heat, the boards creaking like they'd memorized every weight we'd carried here. My glass of sweet tea left cold circles on the rail. For a while we let the cicadas fill the silence. Then Mom reached for a clothespin and spoke low. I carried shame around like a bag I couldn't set down. Thought it was mine to hold forever. But now, she looked out at the yard, sunlight catching the silver in her hair. Now I think it belonged to him all along. Her words loosened something in my chest. "Shame doesn't belong on a porch," I said, tipping the glass, too heavy for light furniture. That earned me her laugh, short, sudden, but real. It startled even her. The sound sat between us like proof that something broken could hum again. By noon, Colonel Knox's truck rolled up the drive, coughing as it idled. He climbed out, slow hat tucked under his arm, and shook my hand with the weight of a man who still knew what discipline felt like. He carried a brown paper bag that clinked when he set it down. "Pickles," he said simply. We ate them straight from the jar on the porch rail, juice dripping down our knuckles. "Discipline saved you," he said, voice gravel thick. "Kept you from striking back when the whole town wanted a spectacle. You let the papers carry the fight." I nodded, thinking of the boardroom lights, the weight of the repaired chair, the way silence can be sharper than shouting. He took a sip of tea condensation sliding down the glass. "Ink washes off," he said. "Other things don't." Mom joined us with fresh laundry folded in her arms. Her hand brushed my shoulder as she passed a wordless thanks. Then at dinner, she laughed again, louder this time, halfway through a story about my niece tripping over her own shoelaces. The sound startled the cicadas into a pause before they resumed their steady chorus. The porch filled with the smell of mustard and charcoal. We ate hot dogs on paper plates, Knox pretending not to notice when one split open on the grill. The evening slid toward cobbler and melted ice cream fireflies competing with the porch light. When the plates were pushed aside, Knox leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "So," he said, looking straight at me, "what will you do with the seat now?" The question hung heavier than the summer air. My hand rested on the porch rail, sticky from tea rings. The repaired chair flashed in my mind, the brass brackets, the applause, the gavel's echo. Out here, the only sound was a rocking chair creak, steady as a heartbeat. I didn't answer right away. Maybe the evening didn't need one yet. The folding chair sat at the center of the hall, brass seams glinting under the tired fluorescent tubes. The hum of the lights mixed with the steady drip of coffee urns at the back, the smell drifting like a quiet welcome. I'd carried the chair from my truck myself, set it down with both hands, and stepped back as the townsfolk filed in. It didn't look grand, just wood and metal scarred, but steady. That was the point. The Wharton Community Center had hosted pancake breakfasts and bingo nights, but tonight it held something heavier. Handouts rustled in calloused fingers, edges bending where nerves pressed too tight. Phones buzzed on silent screens, glowing as people checked in or whispered to each other. I cleared my throat. My voice felt smaller than the room at first. This workshop is called A Seat for Others. It's not just about my story. It's about giving back what silence tried to take away from too many. Eyes turned toward the chair. Some nodded. Some blinked, as if waiting for it to speak. Brass brackets gleamed where the wood had once split. Mom sat in the second row. Her hands folded neatly, a scarf draped around her shoulders, more for comfort than concealment. She leaned toward me as I stepped off the platform for a moment. Her whisper brushed my ear. "You gave me back my seat, too." The words rooted me deeper than the boards beneath my shoes. Colonel Knox spoke next. He didn't need a microphone. His presence carried. "Discipline doesn't just save soldiers," he said, scanning the crowd. "It saves families, neighbors, towns. Proof stands taller than rage." His hand brushed the chair as he passed it like a flag he once saluted. A woman near the back dabbed her eyes. A man in work boots folded and unfolded his handout until the creases tore. Survivors leaned into the moment, some nodding slow, some still frozen in doubt. I stepped forward again. This chair was broken once. Some of you know what that feels like in your homes, in your bones. But broken isn't the same as gone. With care, it can be mended. My fingers tapped the brass bracket. The metallic creak echoed into the hall. A sound small, but sharp enough to cut through silence. Phones rose, snapping photos. Posts went out into the ether, captions I couldn't hear. The external lens reached beyond Wharton now, but for once it didn't feel like gossip. It felt like witness. Mom lifted her chin as the group began to clap. Not polite applause, not forced something that rose like a tide, hands finding rhythm together. The sound bounced against the cinder block walls, filling cracks that shame had carved. I raised a hand, letting the room still. "Let's take a pledge," I said, words slower than my heartbeat. 3 words only. No silence. The hall repeated it. First scattered, then firmer. No silence. The phrase gathered weight each time until even the hum of the lights seemed to quiet for it. I looked out and saw more than faces. Neighbors, colleagues, strangers bound by something simple. The promise to listen, to speak, to refuse the comfort of looking away. As the evening wound down, papers folded into purses, coffee poured into foam cups. For the drive home, I stayed by the chair. The brass seams caught the last flicker before the lights dimmed. People drifted out, some clasping my shoulder, some too quiet for words. Mom lingered. Knox stood near the door, nodding to each passerby like he was counting soldiers back from patrol. I touched the chair once more, palm flat on the mended wood. It gleamed in the dim, not bright, not perfect, but steady enough to hold. Quiet hope lingered in the hall long after footsteps faded. The clink of cups and plates lingered as I closed the community hall, a humble soundtrack after a long night. I bent to steady the mended chair, my thumb tracing the brass seam that proved it could bear more than just me. Justice may arrive through files and signatures, but dignity returns only when we place it back into a community. I'd lost a job, a title, even my place at the table, but found a way forward through discipline and open hands. The local bulletin carried one plain line: Wharton pledges no silence. And you, if your own seat once cracked, would you mend it to sit alone, or to invite someone else beside you?